Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the panel of Smart Systems. Here we are with Hernán Pájaro, Andrés, Felipe, Ramírez, and Jorge Antonio Silva. And we are very glad to have you here. So we will start with Hernán Pájaro, who is consultant and product development lead at BABLE Smart Cities. He has more than 4 years of experience in strategy consulting and project management. He's, besides that, Alumnus DAAD. And he has a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from Colombia and a European joint master's degree in management and engineering of energy and environment from the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm and the Polytechnic University of Madrid. So Hernán, we are pleased to have you here at the Virtual Summit Shaping Sustainable Cities in Latin America, and we are very happy to listen to you.
Thank you very much, and also for the introduction. And also thank you everybody for joining today. I am very excited to be here, even though it's a little bit too late here in Germany. I am very happy to be talking about a topic that is very close to my heart, even though I don't have the background in terms of digital technologies, but since I'm working very closely with smart cities, this is the topic I would like to introduce to you today. It's open and interoperable smart cities and how to really bridge that gap. And to my opinion, is one of the most underestimated challenges when it comes to smart city implementations. So I would like to start with first by understanding what is this interoperability challenge, but most importantly, what's at stake. And I always like to start with this picture. If you've really put in Google smart cities, you might find similar pictures to this, but I like it because it really represents one of the promises when it comes to digital technologies and smart cities. It basically means that everything in the city, it's at your fingertips, whether it is any kind of data, any kind of process, any kind of service in the city. It's basically you're able to access that from just a central location through the use of digital and ICT technologies. So this may be, we're not there yet. So I would like to just take a little bit of a step back and see, for example, where are we right now? So in terms of some numbers, in Europe, there has been around 612 smart city projects funded through the Horizon 2020 project, which is a specific funding stream from the European Commission to fund any kind of innovation. And this has been done between in the period of 2014 and 2017, and it's around 1.7 billion. So there is a lot of money that has been put into piloting different kind of smart city projects in Europe. And this number is actually expected to increase. The overall market spending in smart city initiatives is expected to increase by 49 billion euros by the end of 2023. And Germany alone is now investing around 1.2 billion just to advance the development and implementation of different kind of urban technologies in their cities as part of their COVID recovery package. So they are using these new changes just as a catalyst for these smart cities, and having open standards is one of the key requirements for German cities. And now, if those numbers really don't mean a lot to you because it's just money, in terms of devices, there are going to be around 54 million active IoT connections in European smart cities by the end of 2025. And this is a very staggering number, meaning that all these devices are going to be implemented in the cities, and they're going to be collecting information, sharing information, and really the important here is how those devices are going to be interconnected. So we've been, smart cities has been around for a while now, at least here in Europe, and in a decade of smart city innovations, the multi-million-dollar question is really, why are we not seeing more sustainable, more solutions at scale. So we are not seeing, for example, the picture that we saw before, those really in every city in the world, for example. And there are many barriers, to be honest. We can, create a whole event on what kind of barriers exist in terms of barriers to that hinder the process of implementation of smart cities. They all span from from governance, from data privacy, from financing, funding gaps, information gaps. They are always talking about the silo approach. So all these challenges exist that really put some barriers for the smart city implementations. But funnily enough, the technologies themselves are not the real barrier. So all the different kind of challenges that come with these smart cities is not coming from the technology as such, but from the implementation or the implication of the technology. However, there is one big important technical challenge that cities are facing today, and that's mostly the interoperability challenge, which is representing a major roadblock that is impeding cities to really scale up all these different kind of solutions. For example, we saw that there are already 600 solutions in Europe, but they are really falling short in terms of scaling up and really replicating in different kind of cities. So why interoperability matters? We already know that different kind of IoT solutions are being implemented in cities and also in different kind of urban areas, and that's already changing the urban landscape significantly. And also we're expecting to see more and more devices to be connected. But the question here is really how much are we still missing out due to the lack of interoperability between these systems? And when I talk about interoperability, it's really how these different kind of solutions connect to each other. But let's break down this problem a little bit and then just analyze it step by step. So if we look at the different kind of solutions that exist, the landscape is highly fragmented in terms of the number of vendors, the number of sectors, the number of applications, the number of solutions, the number of standards. So there is a lot going on right now. And this is actually leading to very limited solutions. There are vertical IoT solutions that are limited in scope and also in impact. And just to put a bit of an example here, we have, for example, companies that are selling different kind of sensors. Let's call it air pollution monitoring sensors, etc. But also we do have companies that are selling the entire end-to-end solution. So not only the sensors, but also, let's say, the platform that is gathering the data, the analytics, and any other kind of visualization and software that it's providing different kind of services for the city when it comes to monitoring air pollution in the city. And we also have a different kind of companies that are offering a completely different solution, let's say street lighting or even traffic management systems. But what's the real problem right now is that these solutions, even though they are end-to-end in their own little world, they are really not talking to each other. Mostly because they were not intended or designed from the very beginning to really connect to one another. They are very efficient in their only functions in their own domains, but they really don't are not designed to talk to each other, or even purposely so, like through proprietary technologies that only work for the different kind of tech providers. So the real problem here is that what can we really do in terms of connecting these kind of two systems, for example? How can we leverage the data that we gather from air pollution sensors and also from traffic management? What a city can do really is, identify hotspots, for example, in terms of air pollution in the city, and then divert or redirect traffic to really reduce the emissions in that area, for example, and then even do more informed decisions in different kind of routes and transport patterns, etc. So all this kind of data we can combine, and this is only two systems. Now imagine all the different kind of systems that we can interconnect with the city. So all in all, If a city wants to connect these two systems, it's actually very expensive, especially if these technologies are too different, because they will have to implement a new system that is able to connect these two. And that's when it comes the cost of smart city projects in general that are using proprietary technologies. It is estimated that they cost 30% more. And for example, if we take the amount of money that the European Commission have already invested in those more than 600 projects, this amount of money will represent around 500 million euros just in problems when it comes to integration of different kind of systems that do not function with open standards. If we talk about the value that is lost because of all these systems that are not talking to each other, cities have or are starting to understand and acknowledge the importance and the benefits that comes with interoperability, mostly to create better impact with the solutions they implement. And just to put another number in it, and I'm sorry, I think I really like numbers here, interoperability is really needed to capture between 40 and 60% of the potential value that IoT systems have. That comes mostly with the integration with other kind of IoT solutions. And this actually represent per year on a global scale more than $4 trillion of potential economic impact that is needed or that is unlocked just by ensuring interoperability. There was also one of the figures that was estimated by McKinsey, for example. So in general, cities are really missing out on opportunities by relying on a patchwork of non-compatible solutions or non-integrated solution. And this lack of seamless integration really prevents cities and also companies from really harnessing the full benefits of interoperability, like, for example, lowering costs, not only capital costs, but also operational costs in the long term, creating this, mass market economies of scales, or even accelerating the adoption of new technologies. So if companies and cities work together to really foster interoperability, it will really represent a huge value creation for the entire smart city industry. So why, if it's so important, why is really interoperability not more widespread? So in general, this is a problem that is not only faced by by the cities themselves, but any other industry that handles IoT, like Industry 4.0, for example, or transport, or even smart grids and all these kind of technologies that are other sectors in general. They are experiencing the same interoperability problem, but with cities it's kind of important that they do lack some important capabilities that are needed to pursue a strategy that is based on open standards and also on interoperability, mostly because they are finding very hard to evaluate different kind of solutions or technological solutions, and even to understand if those solutions are actually interoperable and if it's not just a greenwash or a whitewash from the companies themselves. So all these barriers that limit cities to really understand the solution or having the expertise to navigate the really complex, let's say, standard landscape that exists of all the different technologies and protocols on which these technologies work is putting a lot of pressure on cities to and running the risk actually of getting locked in by different vendors in terms of the technology they buy from them. So they will be locked to a long time. And I don't know how much time I have. I think I don't have that much time. Aura, can you confirm?
You have around 1 minute more.
Okay, I think I will just, sorry, I think I thought I had more time for the presentation, but I will just, the next section is just to show, for example, there are some initiatives that are happening in Europe right now to really promote this interoperability in terms of creating really open urban platforms of principles. These are, sorry, I just didn't think it was that short of a time, but there are different kind of reference architectures that are being developed by the European Commission to, in collaboration with industry and collaboration with cities, to really promote the different layers of interconnection between the devices. And here, for example, is a very complex representation of what the architecture or the digital architecture of the entire city as a whole in terms of services. We have at the very bottom level the different kind of devices, and every layer is how they interconnect all the way to the stakeholders in the end. So I think I will just finish there because I don't have much time, but I will be happy to answer some more questions here.
Thanks a lot, Hernán. Yes, we have some questions at Hobbylo, and Juan Camilo Rojas asks, if I am right, in general, the idea is to look for more equality. That is, that most of the people have access to connectivity and its benefits. Also, it is important to have more information through IoT. All that implies more energy consumed. But at the same time, this IoT is actually, in part, used to decrease energy use. So how could you elaborate on that situation that I find kind of contradictory?
Sorry, it was kind of like a long question.
Yes.
So just to understand, the main contradiction is the IoT technologies would actually use more energy. Is that?
Yeah, so the last part, I put it here in our chat. But the question is, how could you elaborate on that situation that I find contradictory?
So we do really have to understand what is the real outcome or impact that these kind of solutions are having. So mostly the IoT connections that are intended to be deployed. Okay, yes. So basically, the idea with IoT is really to increase efficiencies in terms of the processes that are now in a digital world. For example, if we look at how for example, just deploying a smart lighting solution, and I forgot the numbers right now, but I had it in the back of my mind, just the cost saving in terms of energy that comes with implementation of IoT technologies in the street light systems is huge, and it really represents benefits for the cities. And those cost savings are actually important for cities when it comes to financing its own solution or even relocating the cost into other kind of budgets. So there are definitely some benefits to be done in terms of IoT implementations. It's also an important concern when it comes to, you know, I saw you the staggering number of devices that are going to be implemented in cities. So there is a lot of concerns regarding, you know, materials, regarding the energy consumptions they do have. So it is important for cities and also for companies and the industry as such. So for the projects that are going to be implemented to really do this this lifetime cycle approach to understand the real footprint that they do have. So not only looking at the solution itself and the energy that they save, but also looking at the impact that they have in their production and the impact that they will have in the long term too.
Thanks a lot, Hernán, for that answer. We have no more questions meanwhile, so I would say we could continue with Andrés Felipe. Thank you a lot, Hernán.
Thank you.
And I introduce Andrés Felipe. So thank you for being here with us, for participating, Andrés Felipe. Andrés works as Geospatial Information Manager at the Forest Stewardship Council, FSC. He completed his master in geoinformatics and photogrammetry at the Stuttgart University of Applied Sciences as one of 2017 DAAD's scholarship holders, and it's currently based in Bonn, Germany. So welcome, Andrés, and we listen to you.
Thank you, Auda. Very nice to be here with you, and thank you for having me. I hope it's all working from my end. Can you hear me well? Can you see the presentation?
Perfect. Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so thank you, Aura, for having me. I have a background in geoinformatics and photogrammetry, GIS. I've been working as a geospatial guy for so many years. I do not have a a background in smart cities, but I find it extremely interesting. And I think it's going to be the way in which cities will thrive in the future. And we are already seeing some of that. Let me see, can I move forward? Cool. So I want to start with two quotes here. And one is from Plato and one is from the European Commission. Basically, I like a lot the concept that a city is not a city without its citizens. So by definition, cities can only exist if they are inhabited by citizens or were inhabited by citizens. And I believe that's the key point, building upon what the previous presenter just said, that there are a lot of gaps and that cities need to do some sort of things or move forward into their capabilities. I believe it's more up to the citizens to have ideas and to become more active. So moving into the smart cities part of the story, I truly believe there's not an absolute definition of a smart city. I think it's an evolution on how cities evolve and offer citizens with more services and enable citizens to interact with all the services they offer. It's not only about, oh, look, we want to do this or this. It's more how we bring together infrastructure, people, governments, and technologies to provide an attractive and sustainable environment for all. And here I'm bringing some numbers and some concepts from the Smart City Index publication from last year, in which there are 5 clear buckets from which smart city extends its branches. And it's health and safety, mobility, activities, opportunities, and governance. So these 5 branches of work. And on the right-hand side, you see a comparison between 3 cities: Singapore, which is rated as #1 in the Smart Cities Index in 2020, and 2 Latin American cities, Bogota and Buenos Aires. And you see how diverse they are. Citizens there have different priorities. So we cannot put all cities together in one single bucket and say, this solution is a solution that works for everything and for every city. So for Singapore, security is not of that high priority, but if we check Bogota and Buenos Aires, it's a high concern in terms of security. So we cannot put those 3 cities together in the same bucket. And there's a question that keeps popping up to my mind, and who makes a city smart? Is it the city itself, or is it something that should come from the people itself, so that we as citizens, we are not sitting there and waiting for someone or the government to put things there for us. So it's easy to think that all things, all data coming from the Internet of Things is part of something up there, the cloud, that we cannot see, and that it's basically ruling the way we behave now and our relationship with cities and technology and with others. But so the question there, how do we use the data? There is not such thing as the intangible cloud. There are billions of sensors living in our smartphones, in cars, in equipment, farming, satellites, city streetlights, whatever you can think. There are billions of things measuring different variables and different phenomena. So there are tons of gigabytes of data out there. The question is, how do we use them? How do we use those data sets to make our world smarter? How do we make more informed decisions? And it's always the question, how do we make the citizens to be more active? And coming back to the survey I just showed in the last slide, is the citizen engagement part of the survey. And if we compare the Latin American cities with Singapore, there is a clear difference that we don't know whether it's coming from people not being interested in engagement or ignorance, not knowing how to engage with things. And I do see this as a major blocker, so that people are not interested, or they have no motivation of being engaged in things to make themselves or their own lives smarter or better. And I think the whole concept resonates to the fact that we should, or that the citizens should be empowered to become more active and become more participative, not just waiting that something happens, but taking a leading role there. And then I come back to the topic of the session. So where does the Internet of Things meet geography? And it's basically everywhere. Geography is so deeply rooted in our brains and in our minds that we forget about it. And we used to use different apps, Google Maps, Waze, how we rent a bike, how we rent a car, how we ask for an Uber, and the location of that is intrinsically included in all those phenomena. So geography is everywhere, and the location is a fundamental aspect of the data that all these millions of sensors generate. And coming from this geographical background, I think that without an understanding of where a sensor, whether it is a smartphone, a satellite, a car, without knowing where this sensor is located, the critical context is lacking. And we end up with Excel spreadsheets with thousands of rows and thousands of columns, and what do we do with that? So moving from that perspective into a more geographically relevant point of view, the location puts the context into puts the data into context. So we answered the important questions: what has happened, when did it happen, and where did it happen? Without the where, there is no geographical context. So if someone tells you there was a major car accident, what's the first thing you ask? Perhaps how serious it was, and maybe on top of that would be where did it happen? So the where is critical. So it, you know where I'm going. Geography and the context allows you to place the data in a visual manner, which is more powerful and brings more added value than and analyze the mixture of different layers of those billions of data being collected within the context of location plus time. What happened, when, where, plus another additional information brings so much more added value. And how much time I have? Almost there. And I want to bring a couple of examples that I've been closely related to. Again, I'm not a smart city professional, but these things these things give me goosebumps. I get excited when I talk about this. So Sensor Community is a global crowdsourcing sensor network. What they do, it's a open source, citizens-driven approach, which contributes to providing data, environmental data, through a global sensor network. How does it work? These guys thought, look, we think our air is not clean enough, and we want to measure in a more accurate way than the public data allows us. So they thought, why not teaching people how to build their own local sensors? And we collect the data, store the data, and put it there for people to use it. And so they started doing that. They teach people how to build these sensors. It's 100% citizens-driven initiative, so that people could be more comfortable knowing the quality of the air they are breathing in a more accurate way, in a more detailed way than just relying on one or two meteorological or air quality stations in a city of 1-2 million people. So they just had the idea and went for it. They solved it. And I feel this is an amazing approach. And if you want to check it out, just go to the sensor.community. And you can find out more about this. We as a citizen, as a Latin American citizens, we can be part of this as well. Just build a sensor, place it there, and start collecting data, which is great. And now from a more commercial point of view, how much time do I have? 5, 3?
You have around 3 minutes.
Okay, so I will skip the video. I was listening to the previous presentation given from Newton, I think from Google. And he mentioned about this Google's Environmental Insight Explorer, which is a free platform to help cities measure emission sources. And it's an open initiative for cities to understand from a geographical point of view how to manage their carbon emissions. And they focus on 3 main things: transportation, buildings, and solar energy. And again, be aware that we have the geographical thing deep rooted in our minds. So when we see things, we are not thinking about geography, but it's there. It's ruling all these kind of initiatives. I will skip the video. And here we have this solar potential app, which is using 3D satellite imagery coming from Google Earth, plus 3D modeling, plus environmental data to estimate the potential of each one of those buildings. This is the exercise here that was done in Buenos Aires. Solar potential of each one of those buildings. Is it sunny or is it shady? And it helps people and cities to understand what if we switch from a fossil fuel approach to a solar approach? How much carbon, how much greenhouse gas emission will we avoid? And in this case, this example is it relates to, or it can be compared to the fact that 7 million cars will be off the streets if we move to a full solar approach. Same along those lines, they have the same building emissions. So depending on how of the type of the building, residential, commercial, or industrial, they do their modeling and their artificial intelligence magic, and they estimate the total carbon emission per year. That's which is coming mostly from non-residential areas here. How much of carbon is has the full set of buildings emitted into the air? So this all comes from proprietary data, so data that Google owns, which it's also a tricky part of the question. But and same here, transportation emissions. How many trips are people making within the city, outside the city, and all the relationships, and which kind of transportation type they use the most. In this case, in Buenos Aires, most of half of trips are done using the car. So there you have more data to be to make more decisions and more informed decisions rather than just by doing it by gut feeling. And just to end up this short and fast session, there are some things, lessons learned and future. I think with the amount of data that we have, we can address almost any question. The key point is, how do we bring those data together? And coming back to the previous presenter, how do we make those data sets interoperable? How do we make those numbers and those readings work together? That's also the key point that is, as my colleague said, is still a challenge. The fact of data privacy, who owns the data, that it's being collected by smartphone. So Google has a lot of pretty interesting stuff, amazing things, but they are using the data we are collecting with our phones. So the locations we are recording with our GPS. So who owns that data? Am I working for free for Google? Are they using my data in the right way? How do we control that? And especially this is a huge concern here in Europe, especially in Germany, where people are highly concerned on data privacy. If you go there and check, Germany is like an island where there's no Google Street View for the past 10 years. So people are concerned about showing their data to the public. And in the future, it will more fully automated applications will come. So when will we say that's enough of fully automated systems that talk to each other, speak to each other, and then when is it enough? When is the influence of us as humans and as citizens being out of the equation? And with this, I would like to end my presentation. Thank you, Aura, and happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Andrés, for this interesting information. We do have a question, so I will read it. Sergio Palazuelos asks you, well, he says, thank you for the presentation. And then he asks, in the model, how is the variable people engagement administered or encouraged and measured?
What do you mean in the model? I do not fully get the question.
Maybe Sergio, can you clarify that to us, please? I will, meanwhile, try the question here in the chat.
In which?
Here. Sergio, can you write?
I guess he's referring to the survey or the measuring model itself.
Well, maybe if he's referring to the survey, how would be the answer?
I guess the specific questions there, and specific related to citizen engagement.
Okay,
cool. Yeah, got it. I'm checking the chat box.
Perfect.
And I guess there is not such metric that relates to citizens' engagement, but we can see how important the engagement for citizens are, or for people that answered the survey. And we see that in Bogota and Buenos Aires, there is such a small percentage of people caring about engagement that it's kind of mind-blowing that basically we as Latin people, we don't care about what we could do, and we kind of wait until somebody else or a city or government is doing things for us. On the other hand, if you check Singapore, there are 30% of people think that engagement for them is interesting. And it's not only engagement such as the one of the air pollution guys that came up with the system, it's also engagement on asking to the city, asking to the government to bring more services to us so that our lives are, that we have a better life, a quality of life, and that we can be a bit more comfortable living in our cities than the way we are now.
Thank you very much, Andrés, for your answer. And now we will continue. I mean, there are no more questions in the chat, so I will continue presenting Professor Jorge Antonio. Professor Jorge Antonio is from the Universidade Federal do Paraná, or he gives classes there as professor. He was born in La Paz, Bolivia. He has a degree in civil engineering from Universidade Federal de Mato Grosso do Sul, a master's degree in water resources and environmental sanitation from Universidade Federal de Rio Grande do Sul, and a PhD in geodesy at the Universität Karlsruhe. He is currently full professor at the Department of Geomatics at the Federal University of Paraná, and he has experience in geosciences with emphasis on photogrammetry, acting mainly on the following themes, which are remote sensing, laser scanner, cartography, photogrammetry, and image processing. So thanks for participating, for being with us, Professor Jorge Antonio. We are very glad to have you in this panel, and you can start right now. Maybe you can turn on your camera so that we can.
Yeah, I was trying to find how I can activate my camera because I started with the presentation. Okay, I have some problems here. I will try to find the camera.
Okay.
Let me start here. Okay.
Perfect. Yeah.
I will start now. Thank you very much for the introduction, and I'm very happy to be here. I am very happy to see so many young people here. I was listening to some presentations today, and normally when I go to an alumni treffen and alumni reunion, I see a lot of old people like me that were in Germany, and now I see a lot of people involved that are very young, and I learned today a lot with the presentations. I'm very happy. And as you explained, I am professor in Brazil in the field of geomatics, cartography. And I'm also very pleased to see that Andrés is also my colleague. I studied in Karlsruhe, he studied in Stuttgart in the same state of Germany. So Andrés, don't let me lie too much when I tell about what I am going to speak today. I prepared a presentation about a technology that was developed in the end of the last century, and Stuttgart was also very active in the development of such technology. This is LiDAR, or laser scanning. And the aim of this presentation is to introduce this technology to people that don't know it, and show some applications that we can use, where we can use such data, and how we can solve some problems with such data. So when we have sustainable cities or smart cities, what is the topic of this this event. Normally, we have a city, and we want to improve the quality of life. We want to improve the environment, the preservation, and we need to know where the problems happen. We need to solve problems, but sometimes we don't even know where are the problems. I frequently see people that they speak about problems, but they don't have numbers. They don't have statistics to document what the problem. We know there is a problem, but there is a lack of data. We need to know where are things, where are buildings, where are the favelas, where are the traffic, where is the problem of security, landslide, everything that we could map and we could solve. And how can reach this such regions or such points where we can improve the quality of life, or we can establish some rules or restrict some occupation. And this is everything needs data. For example, if we think about using natural resources like solar energy, as Andrés told previously, we need to know, is it worth to invest in solar cells so that we could pay these solar cells with the energy we are producing? Or are we spending more money installing a solar solution that at the end will be not as efficient as we think today? So to locate things, to know how to go there, we need a good cartography. And this is my field of work. I work in geomatics and cartography. And this is the topic of this presentation. How can we get a good cartography or a geometrical description of a city to provide data for the solutions? We have this problem in South America. I could say that in Brazil is also the case. We have maps like these two people that are looking for help with these maps. And most of the maps we find here are old maps, and they are not updated. Official maps were produced in the 70s, 80s, and today they don't represent what we can find in an urban space, especially if we think of urban spaces that are very dynamic. And today, the production of maps is no more work of the public agencies. Every day, more private firms are producing maps, like Andrés also quoted. Google is producing, nobody buys maps anymore. They just look in Google Maps or something similar. And we need this data to plan things. For example, I use a map to go to a certain place in the city, and I know how to move. And I have to trust in this data. Otherwise, I could drive through a risky area, and this would be not good for my health and security. So how can we get a good description of a city in terms of geometry? And then there is a solution that was developed in the end of the last century. This is called LiDAR, or laser scanner. This is an option to measure 3D coordinates from a city or from a, normally you could measure everything, but urban environments are very common because it's difficult to map, and there are a lot of objects also in urban spaces. So we can now map the 3D geometry from an airplane, and this airplane collects 100 million of points on the city and includes all objects. And with this review, I would try to show some potential use of this data within the context of urban spaces and solutions for urban spaces. Here, we could say, to explain very quick, how does it work? Now, we have here a plane. In this plane it shoots a laser ray to the terrain, to the Earth surface, and we measured how long does it take to travel from the plane to the surface and back. So we know that it travels with the speed of light. So we know the range or the distance from the plane to the point where the laser hit. And then we have some ancillary systems that I will not go in detail, but these are GPS or GNS receiver that tells us where the plane is, and another device that measures the attitude, I'll say how it is, if it is horizontal or it is not horizontal, so we can know where the point exactly is on the Earth. So with all these devices, this is a relatively complex system, we can measure points from the air. And the good aspect is this is very fast. It measures a lot of points in a few seconds. So we have a very dense point cloud, and we call the result a point cloud. If I could use this slide as an example, we can see here, every white dot here would be a point where the laser hit the surface. Sometimes it hits the vegetation, sometimes it's the earth or the street here, sometimes it hits a building. And we can at the end have a map of the height of every point that was hit by the laser. And this survey is not uniform in terms of geometry, because it's sometimes some points are very close, some areas are not covered because of shadows. There are some technical restrictions. And it includes not only the terrain. We would like to have the topography, but as the topography is covered by vegetation or buildings, we have also information of buildings, and we have information about cars, people, poles, everything that is above the surface. So another aspect is that it also can, the laser is not just one small point. This is also exaggerated, but the laser hits the surface as a small circle. And so we can have part of the laser that is reflected by the top of the tree, or part of the laser is reflected by the surface of the ground. So we can have different signals from the top or from the ground or other objects in the middle. And so we can have information of different layers above the surface. And this is very good for mapping, because we can map, for example, here, the height of the tree, or we can also map the terrain below the trees in a dense covered, in an area covered by dense vegetation. We can also map buildings, and we can have reflections from the top of the building and of the ground, especially at the border of the building where the signal hits part of the building and part in the ground. So at the end, we have a very dense point cloud. This is a small point cloud we collect here in Curitiba, in the university. And we can see here, you can see here in blue, all the points that we measured with topography, normal topography, dense grid here. And these red dots are the points that were measured by the plane in the laser scanner. You see here, some points hit the vegetation and didn't hit the ground. So we have only blue points. This is the other survey. And we see here, some points reached the ground. So we couldn't interpolate a model of the topography, even in regions where the vegetation covers the ground. This is in Brazil, it's very often that we have dense vegetation and we have problems to map the ground. We have, if you see in a satellite image or in an aerial photography, some streets that we have, you see just trees, you don't see the ground, you don't see the street. So this is an advantage of this device. And so we have two models here. One of the surface that is visible from the plane that includes the buildings and the trees, and another that we can compute by interpolation is the terrain model. A third product is the computation of a height of the objects above the surface. So if you make the difference, compute the difference of the surface model and the terrain model, you can have the height of the objects above the terrain. In this case here, we have the terrain that was filtered from the data set. And we have here only the height above the terrain. So we can see the height of every single tree, or in the case of an urban area, the height of buildings. So this is an example of how, this is also in the university here in Curitiba, we classify these points between ground, roofs, and vegetation. So we can have a geometry, a very detailed description of the geometry of buildings. You can see here also the shape of the roof. This is very easy to see the shape of the roof. And with this information, we can support some decisions in the field of smart cities. And I have here some ideas. One is if you are able to classify, the points here, separating what is roof, what is vegetation, what is ground, you can separate the roofs. So you can separate the roof. You can delineate roofs. And so you have the area of each building. And this could be used for tax purposes, but you can also think about using this area to compute how much water, rainwater, can I collect from buildings in a neighborhood or in a place like the university. How much can I produce in rainwater, using the roofs to collect water and storing this water in some storage devices like you see here in this simple model here.
Professor Jorge, you
yes?
are over time, so continue 1 minute more and
okay, I will continue
with the questions.
I'm just finishing, yes. And you can also compute the slope in shape of the roofs, so you can see if they are suitable for solar energy, because you have the shape in the tilt in the angle of every piece of the roof. And you can map the urban space in 3D. Today we speak very much about 3D models. And now we speak also of building information models that are the models that help managing a building. So this is possible with 3D data collected by laser scanners. I saw a presentation also today about fluid management, and you can compute with a very dense description of the topography. Where does water flow in the surface of a city, considering the blocks of buildings and trees, and where can it be accumulated in fluid? So you can plan the rescue of such events. We can map urban infrastructure like poles, like buildings and poles, and also you can map the objects that you have to block sound, to grant comfort for people that are close to highways, for example. And everything that you can do with such a 3D data to ensure that people can have a better life. And I would like to conclude this presentation with a short remark that I found here. This is, today we are having digital world and real world. And this is like digital twin. We say that we need to propose and solve solutions based on this digital data and apply it to the real world. And so in this sense, this technology enables solutions to get this digital world. Excuse me for the delay, and I thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Professor Jorge Antonio, for all these interesting presentation in LiDAR topics. Now we have time for some questions. I may check in the chat. So Jose Triana asks you, how do you plan the trajectory of the airplane to have an accurate estimation of the 3D model of a city?
Excuse me, how do I plan what?
How do you plan the trajectory of the airplane to have an accurate estimation of the 3D model of a city?
Yes. We have to plan we say the flight. How will it fly and cover the region? Normally, you make one coverage, but if you want a denser point cloud, you can travel in the perpendicular direction. So you have a very dense point cloud, and you can have rays that come from one direction and from another direction so you avoid occlusion problems, and you have a very dense view of all sides of buildings and trees. Normally, we try to map trees, especially in forest, with very narrow angles, because if you have very wide angles, you don't reach the ground. So normally in forested areas, we make very narrow angles, so the beam comes more vertical to reach the ground. I don't know if she wanted to hear that.
Thank you, Professor Jorge Antonio. And your colleague, Andrés Felipe, asked, some smartphones have LiDAR sensors included. What is the role you think these more affordable devices will play in the near future?
Yes, I myself bought a small ranging measurement device, but today they are not very popular. I hope it will be more popular in the future. You don't find too much cell phones here with such devices, but I saw people measuring small things, small objects, and I can imagine a lot of applications if I had some device like this. But today, you say, in the context of our Congress here for a big city, small devices still have a limited range. So you cannot map, for example, a church or a street with a very small range. You need a wider range to get a complete view of the environment. But yes, for small objects, it's very useful. And I can, for example, use it to map, like in the archaeology, something that you discovered and you want to model it, you can model with your cell phone. Why not? This is an open question.
Thank you, Professor Jorge Antonio. We have a last question for you. And Maria asks, could the same be accomplished instead using image processing techniques?
What did she ask? If I could.
I wrote it in the chat. So
could the same be accomplished instead using? Yes. Currently, we have now, we used, like we say, we have a very dense coverage of photographs especially with drones, with small airplanes. And we also produce point clouds. The problem is with these drones now is they are limited in time. They can only work 20 minutes. And so you have to cover a very large area. You need a lot of drones and a lot of batteries. So normally covering a city demands an airplane. So we do this with airplanes normally. Traditionally it was done with airplanes, but the advantage of laser is this is very automatic. It just cuts, it measures the data on the fly. It doesn't need to process afterwards. Now with image processing tools, we are always improving the automation. So you can get also point clouds with photogrammetry.
Thank you very much, Professor Jorge Antonio. Now I leave Maria Rengifo, my colleague from ABAPA, to moderate the discussion of this panel. So welcome, Maria. and you have your turn. Thank you very much.
So, hi everyone. My name is Maria, as Cora just already told you. I just have a few questions for you three. And if you want, I'm going to direct the questions to a specific speaker, but you can contribute to other speakers' questions or however you want, okay? So I have first a question for Hernán, and it is, I know that you've been guiding efforts for smart cities, and I know one of the big problems to build smart cities is that there are no funds for smart cities initiatives, or are very scarce. And how do you think these funds can be increased?
Yeah, that's a very good question. This is actually one of the most critical challenges when it comes to funding different kind of smart city implementations. One of the big problems here in Europe is mostly that smart city implementations are dependent too much on public funding. So one of the ways that we're trying to foster is to really think through different kind of business models for the smart city applications, trying to see where to monetize or capture the value of this solution in order to make it attractive for different kind of investors from the private sector to, for example, generate more return of investment. For example, the use of data collected for a specific application, let's say smart lighting, for example. If we use different, if you use that infrastructure that we put for a smart lighting solution, we could integrate different kind of sensors just because the connection points to the internet or the fiber optics are there, or any other kind of data that we can collect there. We could capitalize on that, monetize it, and probably create some revenues that could be added to be for the financing of the solution. So important part is really to create a way or new revenue models for the different kind of solutions to really attract investors. And that's a way so that we can really, co-invest in these solutions and not only rely on public funding.
Sounds great. Yeah, thank you. And I have another question. It could be for you or for just any of you three. And it is all these initiatives are going to use a lot of data. It could be from cell phones, from sensors, from anything, right? And how can we make use of this data while preserving citizens' privacy and data security? So I don't know who wants to answer that.
I can answer. I think it all depends on where you are. If you talk about Europe, there is a quite, what's the word? Strict regulations in terms of privacy and GDPR. And that is why you keep seeing pop-ups on websites saying, do you accept the cookies? That means that you're agreeing that the provider of information on the internet could store your data. So, but if we move to Latin America, we basically don't care. We are not aware of such items, and we are not concerned that our data could be misused at all. So that all depends on how sensitive the issue is. As I mentioned in my presentation, here in Germany, people are extremely concerned about data. They don't want to share it. And that's the way the society works. And it all comes down to me as a person granting access to others, of using the data I'm collecting with my cell phone. If I grant the access, then there's nothing else we can do. And that's why this huge discussion of battles between the US companies, Google, Facebook, they are struggling a lot here in Europe to make things the same way they do in the US, because the culture is different and people in different geographies behave differently. So I think until a global standard on how to deal with this kind of privacy is not established, there won't be any agreement on that. So every country or every group of countries will deal with their things in an isolated way. So Europe strongly against data sharing. Latin America, we don't know or we don't care. And the US, they have different things. So I think there's a global standard that needs to come into place so that we have something more robust to deal with this kind of data things, data privacy.
I still think that,
oh, sorry.
Yeah, go on. Okay, I
no,
was
no,
just
sorry,
going,
you go first.
okay. I was just going to say that even if, I know what you mean, Andres, I know that here in Latin America, we don't worry as much as in Europe about our data. But even if we don't worry yet, I think it's going to happen in the future. Like we are going to start feeling concerned about it. So I would like to think like what do you think about it? Like how would you make use of this data without violating privacy of the users? Yeah. So let's first Hernán, he wanted to say something, and then you, Jorge Antonio. Sure.
No, just Jorge, go first. Don't worry.
I have just a small observation. We have the question about privacy here in Brazil, for example. I can imagine in other countries is the same. I say we sell our privacy for security. I'm very happy that the police has cameras or is monitoring the movement. And as Andrés said that in other countries, they don't want it, but sometimes you are happy that you are in the camera and they are looking at you and you are, they know where you are because we have very different problems of security. And for us, it's not, as Andrés said, not that we don't care too much, but sometimes it's also, we care that we are there because this is a good situation for us, that we are being observed, and when something happens, they know what happens and where I was. In Europe, they don't want it. They don't need it. It's just as this remark.
Yeah, so it's like sometimes we're willing to pay the price, like with our own privacy. Yeah. So yeah, and Hernán, what do you want to say?
Yeah, probably to tie those comments together. How I really see data in general is as a commodity or like as a good. So basically, you're giving away that data in order to get that security or that feeling of safety, for example. But in Europe here is a little bit of a different, because there are more concerns about different kind of challenges, etc. But in general, when it comes to commodities and goods, it's very important to have those regulations in place. So it comes from very top political level to a certain extent. Mostly, as any other good or consumer good is regulated in the market, data should be the same, because, at some point, data, privacy and all these kind of things is going to affect us in one way or another. And that only can come if there's strong political commitment in order to regulate this. And of course, citizen push and backlash can also offer a big impact in those projects. For example, I don't know if you know the project Sidewalk Labs. It's one of the, let's say, most famous smart city or smart district projects. It was a Google sister company called Sidewalk Labs. They wanted to develop a new district in Toronto, where they wanted, to create this kind of technological paradise to a certain extent, but they had some really big concerns from the local people in terms of data privacy, because they thought that imagine, how much data Google collects just from Google search. Now imagine if they create an entire district, they wanted to collect data on most behavior. So it was, they call it sometimes the behavior data farm. So they create a lot of concerns, and the citizens created a huge backlash. And now the project is put in a long hold. Actually from last year, they said that it was because of COVID, but of course, all these concerns were raised, and that made the company really rethink what they were doing. So privacy is really, really important. And if it's not coming from the political commitment, it can also come from more push from the people.
Yeah, that's true. I also think that at some point, like, people can just start obstaculizing all the progress, because there's no transparency on how they use our data or how much data are they collecting. So yeah, that's why I think it's an important thing to think about. And I have a question for Andrés. I saw in your presentation, you talk about that we need to transform data from spreadsheets to maps and visualization. So I was thinking that this sounds like really storage heavy, because graphs and maps need a lot of space in comparison to just data, like text data or numbers. So I was thinking, do we have already the tools to process huge volumes of maps and graphs, and to have everything we need represented as maps and graphs?
I think we do. The cloud infrastructure that's out there is impressive. I don't think it's a matter of whether we have the IT infrastructure to store all that kind of data. You imagine you are storing in your cell phone, if you have the what's called the location thing activated, you are recording pretty much every minute, every 2 minutes, your GPS location, and that goes to the Google's cloud. And now imagine how many people own smartphone. So I don't see that as an issue. Of course, when you bring down to earth, to normal life, to small towns, developing countries, that's another story. But I think that the technology is there. It is a matter of resources on how do you want to implement the solution. Are you talking about small town in Colombia that has no funding to buy a cloud service to store all the data? So I think, that's my point. I think the technology is there, but the question mark is how scalable it is to cover all kinds of different societies. The Europe and the US, probably it is. There's no problem. But when we go to developing countries, Latin America, Africa, Southeast Asia, that's a totally different story. Cities have no money, and they have more important things to invest in, maybe security, maybe transportation. We don't know. So I stop there.
Okay, cool. Thank you. And one last question for Jorge Antonio. Could we or have we used this LiDAR technology, I don't remember the name, to monitor real-time situations, like, for example, a natural disaster or a big public event or something like that?
No, it's not possible to monitor real-time events because it is a survey made by the plane. So you have to be with a Zeppelin or something like this over the region monitoring, but it scans the surface. Normally you travel with the plane, you fly with the plane, making some strips then you travel to map another region. So this could be maybe if you had some, we have terrestrial lasers for small regions covering a facade or something. You can install this to monitor something. But like in an urban area, a bigger region, it's not possible. You have to fly over the region. So you can, the thing you can do is, if you have the flight before, then you can make a flight after the event and quantifies how much did you lose, for example, in an earthquake or so, where are the losses, where did the houses disappear, where could we find some victims of the disaster. This is possible, but not monitoring the event online in real time. This is not possible.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Thank you very much for your answer. That's all from me. And I really appreciate the time you take to attend this conference. It was amazing to have you here. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It was nice to be here.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you very much. And I'm very glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.